Unless One Piece pulls a major final twist that ends the story in absolute tragedy, we can pretty much say for certain that Luffy will become Pirate King, defeat all the big baddies, and change the world. But then what? What is going to happen to all of the Straw Hats, and most importantly, what will the One Piece world overall look like 10 years after the world has been saved? Well, luckily, we know pretty much exactly what many of our favorite characters would probably be up to based on their dreams and a lot of foreshadowing that we got in the story, like Sanji, who at this point will definitely have found the All Blue, and Robin, who will finally learn the true history of the world. But then there's of course Luffy himself, who at this point will have actually already achieved his dream. And if I'm being completely honest, my personal bet would be that Luffy actually dies at the end of the series, because he is kind of this Jesus-like figure throughout the story that I can totally see sacrificing himself to save everyone else. But that being said, let's stay positive here and assume that he actually survives. Like maybe Chopper somehow heals all the lifespan that he's lost, and now he is the freest man in the world. Which now takes us 10 years into the future, where Luffy is about to set out on his next major adventure. And so he steps out of his family home on New Dawn Island. And what is this new unheard of island? Well, it's a new island formed after the collapse of the Red Line, where all the races of the world have now basically come to live together in harmony. And let me tell you, this island would be absolutely insane. The main part would probably be jam-packed with houses, stores, and a massive party area in the center, because of course it is Luffy's island, and what else really would he rather do than party all the time with all his friends? And speaking of those friends, here's a shocker for you. Luffy, after the story, I think would be married and has a 4-year-old daughter named Lily, but we'll save the surprise of who actually managed to tie this Rubberman down for a little bit later. For now, Luffy is on a mission. He wants to throw a massive party for his kid's 5th birthday, and so of course that means inviting his friends. All of his friends. But of course there is one big problem for this. Only some of the former Straw Hat pirates actually live on this island. Which ones, you ask? Well, we'll see in just a moment, as Luffy does leave home with just his straw hat and a bag full of invitations, but before setting out, he has a few invitations to actually deliver around his island. And while he's on his way out, we can see what an incredibly diverse place New Dawn Island has actually become. And that's because many of the people that we witnessed Luffy befriending on his journey to become Pirate King have actually decided to come and live here. There are some fishmen, minks, mermaids, giants, tontadas, Skypeians, all going about their business within the various districts of the town, which are filled with shops and restaurants from all across the One Piece world. There's even an amusement park and a giant music arena in the very center of the islands. Which of course is, let's be real, exactly what you would expect Luffy's island design to look like. So let's now explore the rest of this place, because Luffy hops over to the first of these mini islands here, and these are actually pretty neat, I think, because they house some of his closest friends. For example, this one right here, closest to Luffy's house, is actually Sanji and his wife Pudding's world famous 5-star restaurant. The restaurant is basically the completion of Sanji's dream, since New Dawn Island is located right in the middle of the famous All Blue, which is where all the 4 seas join together. And while of course there is no 100% guarantee to know for certain that this will happen in the actual story, I do personally think that it is pretty likely that the Red Line will actually be destroyed, at least the part where the reverse mountain is, because I mean, come on, it's basically a big giant X mark already that is marking the spot here. And if this part is destroyed, that will leave space for New Dawn Island to form out of the rubble. And so Luffy just swings straight through the front door, pops his first invitation into Sanji's chef hat, and then grabs all of the food that Sanji and his hardworking chefs have spent hours preparing, stuffs it all into his giant sack for this long trip around the world. And at first, Sanji is understandably furious and chases after Luffy, but after he actually stops and reads the invitation, he just smiles. So that's one straw hat down, many more to go. And Luffy's next stop is this little island, which is home to 2 world famous buildings. The first here is a university founded by the greatest archaeologist in the world, Nico Robin. She created this place with her good buddy Saul, so that anyone who wanted to study archaeology and the ancient past could just gathered here to learn. But as Luffy barges into Robin's office, he finds that she's apparently out on some sort of grand expedition. So I guess she's the first one we have to add to our list of Straw Hats to find out somewhere in the One Piece world. And so he then hops over to the hospital on the other half of the island where Dr. Chopper and Dr. Law can basically cure any disease. And they have even developed this super cool bird ambulance system which can bring in patients from all over the world. But that's now Chopper and Law both invited. Check. Because next up is this middle island, which is actually where most of the patients of the hospital actually come from. Why is that? Well, it's because this little island houses Jinbei's Fishman Karate School, where he trains anyone who wants to learn how to fight alongside this former Fishman revolutionary here. And so that's Jinbei invited, and on the same island is the massive Never Lost Dojo as well, where anyone can come and learn the way of the sword. And this place is really cool because Zoro actually hosts monthly tournaments for anyone wanting to challenge his title as the world's strongest swordsman. Which, you know, if we're being honest, it's probably a good idea that people actually come to him because we all know he'd absolutely just get lost trying to find strong opponents. So he really developed a smart system here. But for some mysterious reason, he is also off the island right now, and I do wonder what he might be doing out in the world. And after leaving the dojo, Luffy then flies over to the brightest of the little islands, which is funnily enough called Golden Island. Wonder who named it that way. Guess we'll find out soon enough. On this island is a massive casino run by the former warlord Crocodile, and when Luffy goes inside, he finds his old mentor Rayleigh hanging out with his new gambling buddy Kizaru. Yeah, apparently after the Lightfoot user left the Marines, these two quickly became gambling buddies. Plus, Kizaru's light speed is super helpful when Rayleigh needs to escape whenever his longtime lover demands he actually brings home some money. And right next to the casino is the local branch of the Tangerine Bank. And who is the head of the Tangerine Bank? Well, you guessed it, it's none other than the grown-up Otama, who trained under a certain cat burglar that we all know and love. But why in the world would she be running a bank? Well, keep watching to find out in just a bit. But now there is one more stop before Luffy can finally leave the island, and that is the research lab on the final little island right here. And this is where all the fun starts, because as soon as Luffy arrives, a massive explosion shakes the islands. Out of the smoke comes a giant version of his grandpa Garp. Luffy's actually super excited to see a mega-sized Garp, but that instantly changes when his grandpa's massive fist comes rushing straight towards him. But just as the fist is about to crush Luffy, it explodes into flashing lights and sparks, and then out of the smoke comes the genius scientist, Dr. Vegapunk, who can barely keep himself from laughing at his hologram prank. You see, after the events at the end of the story, Vegapunk decided to set up shop right here with Luffy on New Dawn Island, and even though he doesn't get all that limitless funding from the world government that he used to, he can still make some pretty awesome stuff to help out the world. So yeah, Luffy will definitely be spending some time at least playing around with some of Vegapunk's fun new technology, which you can actually see in use all over the town, and then Luffy does leave him with some instructions for the party as well. And with that, Luffy jumps over to the other side of the main island. He stops by Usopp's house, but he is also curiously missing. He then flies past this tiny new government building that no one really cares about and skips right to the new Frankie family warehouse, which is of course where Frankie comes up with all of his crazy new inventions as well. And the most important of those is probably the new and improved version of the Sea Train, which is currently leaving the station at warp speed. Now Luffy somehow manages to stretch and grab on, and his new adventure to invite all of his friends is now fully underway. And as he leaves, a giant hologram of his face appears in the sky above the island, announcing his daughter's birthday party to everyone who is there. And of course, a massive cheer rises up throughout the island. Luffy smiles, and it does seem like Vegapunk understood his message just fine. However, despite how awesome Luffy's new home island actually is, he would probably be really excited to head out to sea after so much time doing nothing. Plus, there's still 6 other former crewmates and a ton of other important friends and characters to find out in the world. Which now brings us to a super important part of this specific scenario, because now that we're setting out into the world, we need to know what exactly has happened to the world after Luffy became Pirate King. And well, while we don't know for certain, of course, there are a few things that will most likely happen at the end of One Piece. Luffy will find the One Piece and become Pirate King, because if not, what have I done with my life for the last 10 years? He will also take down the corrupt world nobles and bring the dawn to the world, which basically means setting the world free. And so these few things at least are basically guaranteed to happen, unless Oda Sensei pulls some sort of crazy twist that no one's expecting. And I'm sure it'll be super easy to find a new perfect political system that has no problem at all ruling an entire planet, but let's skip over it and for now just assume that there is a new government that works way better than the last one. Now there are still pirates, even bad pirates, but the good pirates and marines now do a really good job of keeping everyone from doing so much damage, and with Luffy having such a diverse crew, there is much less discrimination against other races throughout the world. Which is actually part of Franky's purpose for creating the new sea train system, which will eventually connect the entire world together. And this is actually really important for Luffy's current journey as well, because as we all know, Luffy could never get anywhere sailing on his own. And so the first stop after New Dawn Island is actually Elbaf, because we're going in the reverse direction of the Grand Line, where Luffy now brings some invitations to the new leaders of the Giants. And actually these days, not only Giants live on Elbaf, because after making friends with Usopp, they are of course open to anyone who wants to become a brave warrior of the sea. And Luffy was actually hoping to find both Shanks and Usopp right here, but it does seem that the Giants haven't seen Shanks around in a while, and Usopp seems to be out adventuring with his dad, who does have a lot of making up to do. And finally, I will say, because it took 10 years for most of the deadbeat dads in the world to actually spend time with their kids. And so now back on the train, Luffy's next stop is Wano, but suddenly a massive explosion rocks the train. Now the train itself is fine because I mean, Franky made it, and have you seen the kind of stuff that Franky makes? But Luffy looks out of the window and he sees this massive ship speeding towards the train. And while the other passengers freak out, Luffy is thrilled to see Buggy, who is the new ruler of Pirate Island, of course. However, Buggy does seem fairly determined to take out the train, and Luffy comes out to stop him. However, as Luffy's about to charge up a Gomu Gomu attack, he hears an incredibly familiar voice shouting from the top of the train. He turns around and is absolutely shocked to find out that his 4-year-old daughter Lily is shouting insults at the Buggy pirates who are coming across the waves. And before he can stop her, she jumps up, catches a cannonball, and throws it back at the oncoming ship, which sounds ridiculous, but this is Luffy's kid after all. And then seemingly out of nowhere, a giant ship from Elbaf appears and cuts off Buggy's ship, allowing the train to continue on without Luffy having to even fight. Because this is actually part of the allied countries' jobs to protect the sea train route that is connecting all of them together. But now that Luffy's kid is on board, all he can really do is laugh and take her along for the ride. Though I bet that Luffy's wife is not going to be happy at all when he returns. Anyways, onto the land of the samurai. Here, Momo is still the shogun, and the borders have finally been opened to the rest of the world. And here is where we find our favorite green-haired swordsman, because apparently his wife, who is Momo's sister Hiyori, dragged him back to her home to see her family. But of course, when Luffy tells him about the party, he cannot resist the invitation and even decides to join the journey to find the other crewmates, so cross off one more of the list. But that's of course not all that is there to see in Wano, because Luffy's old marine rivals Smoker and Tashigi now run an orphanage and a sword museum where Tashigi shows off all the famous blades that they have collected from bad pirates over the years. Because really, is there a better place to start a literal sword museum except the place that literally makes the best blades in the world? And after Wano, the next step is Whole Cake Island. Now, these islands of course used to be the home of the Emperor Big Mom, but now our donut-loving mochi man Katakuri has created a ton of world-famous bakeries on the many islands of Totlands. And that's because originally these islands were all themed around food like chocolate and fluffy cake, so it's only natural really that Katakuri would want to take all of these resources to make the absolute best sweets in the entire world. Of course, deep down he really just wants to eat the best best sweets himself, but he would definitely share when Luffy and the gang come to drop off an invitation. And so, after losing to Lily in a sweets eating contest, they all take the train to Dressrosa, and I'm actually starting to wonder if we will find any of the other Straw Hats here. Now, once they land, they see that the island has been rebuilt from the ground up, and the tribe of dwarves who helped save the kingdom from the evil warlord Doflamingo 10 years ago are now a fully integrated part of the society here. Luffy, of course, invites all of his friends to the party and then gives special instructions to Leo, the leader of the Tontada, to pass out the remaining invitations to the rest of the Straw Hat Grand Fleets. But as we'll see at the end of this video, this actually creates a huge problem for Luffy that we'll discuss later on. Now, by this time, about a week has passed since Luffy left the island, and we've reached the exact opposite side of the world, which may seem super fast to travel as far as they have, but remember, the sea train was made by Franky, so of course it is super fast. And between adventuring on islands and practicing swords with her uncle, Lily is having the time of her life. But we've only found Zoro so far, so where is everyone else? And what about Luffy's brother or his dad? What's everyone up to? But in this super important location, which used to be where Marijoa was located, is this new island right here, which is also the headquarters of the newly established government of the world. The way I would see it is that after the fall of the previous government, the world would basically just take out the celestial dragons and other evil rulers and make some sort of new system of government with elected officials from allied kingdoms and even some pirate crews. And while this system probably is also not perfect, let's be honest, no government really is, Luffy's brother Sabo now spends his days basically watching over the new government to make sure any corruption is stamped out completely. At least that's what he's supposed to be doing when he's not chewing down on delivery orders of Sanji's world famous ramen. However, Sabo does agree to take time off, and Luffy also drops off an invitation for the new Marine Admiral Kobe as well. However, as great as it is to see his brother, Luffy doesn't care to stick around the government for long, so they quickly hop back on the train and continue their adventure, which takes them back to the location of the original sea train on Water 7, where surely we have to meet another Straw Hat. Right? Now, this island is completely different from when we first visited it in the original story, and that's because it isn't even an island anymore. Remember that Water 7 was sinking because of these giant waves, but that is no longer an issue because together Franky and the mayor of Water 7, Iceberg, finally managed to transform the entire city into one giant floating ship. Franky has of course also decked out his former home with some fun new technology, but the most incredible invention of all of it is a fleet of massive balloons which allows the people to safely reach Skypeia, which is exactly where the gang heads next, and it is up in the clouds that they finally meet up with some old friends. That's because Usopp and Yasopp are both having a friendly sniping competition trying to snipe the Golden Bell from miles away, but right next to them is one of the few honorary Straw Hats as well, Yamato. That's right, Yamato has finally gotten out to explore the world, just like she promised at the end of the Wano arc, and boy is she happy to see Luffy. In fact, after their competition, they finally drop off all the invitations with their Skypeian friends, and then Usopp and Yamato, yes, this time for real, both join the group and head back down to the surface. And we finally got some other Straw Hats back on board, and I'm seriously hoping that the others didn't just die or something, because where are they? However, there is one major problem coming up ahead, and that's because the train doesn't continue on forever. It's not completed. You see, when the train reaches the end of the tracks, the group finally finds Franky, who is working with his new crew of cyborg construction workers to complete the sea train tracks. But no train means no more free rides, but this isn't really an issue for long because Franky has the 1000 Sunny with him. And so when Luffy asks, Franky of course agrees to come with them on their trip, so the gang, along with our super cyborg, continue onward from here. Which brings us to Alabasta, where it's basically raining Straw Hats. Alabasta has actually become a world famous hot spring destination at this point, thanks a bunch Gadetsu, and Vivi is currently of course ruling the kingdom after her dad passed away, but politics are not currently on her mind at all because she is rocking out at a concert for the worldwide music phenomenon Soul King Brook. That's right, our Straw Hat skeleton has gone back to being a rock star, and he travels the world with his whale friend Laboon. And he's not the only former Straw Hat here though, because Robin is also enjoying the concert while taking a break from studying in the Royal Alabasta Library. And so after enjoying the concert, Vivi, Brook, and Robin all join with the crew, and together, with Laboon tailing behind them, they set out for what used to be the East Blue. And here they enter the domain of the mega rich bank CEO Nami, which might surprise you you, but after finishing her map of the entire world, Nami sold her completed navigational charts and made a fortune. She then took all that money, started a worldwide banking group, Tangerine Banks, and has basically become the richest person in the One Piece world. I guess at this point she doesn't need to charge even her friends 300% interest anymore. She even has bought everyone in her hometown a massive mansion to pay back all the trouble that she caused as a kid. But when her friends arrive, Luffy's former navigator drops everything to give Lily a giant hug, and then she immediately takes over sailing the ship with the crew. Which now is all of the crew, but there are still some super important people left to find. And so the next stop is Luffy's hometown, the former Goa Kingdom. However, upon arrival, they immediately run into trouble. Cannonballs start raining, splashing down everywhere around the ship, and that's of course because Luffy's grandfather Garp is still alive and chucking the missiles at the ship from the shoreline, while Luffy's father Dragon lounges nearby eating his favorite greasy sandwiches. However, after they land and Lily proceeds to beat up her great-grandfather, Luffy invites the two to the party back on New Dawn Island. And Shanks also comes down to meet the gang at the beach, and he is joined by the barkeeper Makino and their own baby boy, who is now around 10 years old already. And honestly, of course, it's entirely possible that none of these three super powerful fighters might be alive at the end of the story, but for now we don't know, so I'm just going to add all of them anyways. And so now, with all the invitations delivered, it is time to head back to New Dawn Island, where with all of his friends united, he throws one of the greatest parties the world has ever seen to celebrate Lily's birthday, including of course Luffy's wife Boa Hancock, which is of course the best case scenario for what could happen after One Piece. But what if things actually went horribly wrong for Luffy and his friends along the way, and instead of becoming Pirate King, Luffy was instead captured and sentenced to death to be executed by the world government? And it's just absolutely insane to think about all the people who would come to rescue him that I just had to make an entire video to see if Luffy would actually survive, and you can watch that right here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.